No matter who you are and how you live your life, you have certain fantasies that you keep secret to yourself. They're ways of thinking or feeling that kind of just sit underneath the surface of your conscious mind, and in some ways they do direct your behavior. Now, as someone who identifies as male, I have spent my life kind of dealing with what I call the male fantasies that are kind of hidden below the surface of our lives. And in this video today, I wanted to share 3 hidden male fantasies that I have noticed in myself and in the other males that are around me that I think might be interesting to bring to light, to express so that they're more clear and you can identify them when they appear in your life. Now, I want to be very respectful of gender fluidity and non-binary culture and all that type of thing. So I'm not trying to say that all men are this way. Obviously, everyone is their own person. But these are things that I have noticed as someone who is a cis male, if you like to use that term, who has typically male or masculine tendencies. So let's get into the 3 hidden male fantasies that I have noticed that most men have that can kind of dominate and change the way they live their life. So the first hidden male fantasy that I've noticed is the desire for power. Power is such an interesting part of our society and our culture. We all crave it in some way for ourselves at a personal level and also at a cultural, family, peer group level. This desire to be seen as someone who has high status, who is powerful. Now, in another video, I talked about the idea of building status in your life in a healthy way. So I won't go into too much detail about the ways I think you can do that, but I want to say it is something that I've noticed as a man that I do crave in many parts of my life. I want to feel powerful. I want other people to respect me. I want to feel like I have choice and I have agency in my life. And you probably feel the same. Now, one of the things that is a trap, especially in the male sort of domain, is that very often we lean too far into the desire for power. You see this in people who become workaholics, who are always trying to get promoted, always trying to sort of show their status, bragging, trying to kind of push their agenda on other people. This seems to be a more masculine trait, and it's something that can be kind of corrosive in your life if pushed too far. I do believe the desire for power can come from a healthy place, but very often when we fall into the trap of just seeking power for its own end, we become very destructive and very unlikable in our lives. So I would suggest if you feel for yourself that there is a drive to be seen as powerful or to have power, especially over other people, really examine where that desire is coming from. Is it leading you down a path which may not be healthy? I know for myself, in many areas of my life, especially in my career, I've had to curb myself many times from chasing certain goals because really all I wanted was the status and the power that came from them, not necessarily the actual goals themselves. So power is the first of the male fantasies that I've noticed can dominate our lives, and it can become a trap when it goes too far. The next male fantasy is sex. The desire for sex, the desire to be seen as sexually promiscuous or omnipotent or whatever it is, to have this sort of desirability in the world. Particularly for heterosexual men, there's this desire to sleep with a lot of women, to be seen as someone who is very successful that women desire. Of course, it's a complete fantasy. No man is ever going to be desirable to every other person in the world, but we all have it to some extent. I think this is why we look at things on Instagram in particular, and we look at people who are in very good physical shape or seem to have their life together in terms of their fashion and style, that we see them as somewhat sexually attractive, as having that sexual presence and power, if you like. And it can become a little bit of a trap, especially for men. This is where you see a lot of men come unstuck in their life. They get in relationships or into dynamics because of the sexual element, and they fall prey to negative or destructive behavior. This is why things like pornography and strip clubs and all those type of things exist, to kind of fuel the male fantasy and desire to feel sexually powerful, to feel like we're wanted and desired. And even though it kind of gets a little bit sated by that situation, it's not something that's real, and it's not something that actually helps us to build healthy sexual relationships. It took me a long time in my life to really understand this part of myself and to come to terms with it. Generally generally it's a bit of a taboo topic. It's not something that's taught in our families or in our societies very openly. Thankfully, these days it's getting more open, the idea of sexuality and our desire for sex and to be seen as sexually desirable by other people. It's becoming more of a comfortable thing to talk about. But as a man, I think it's very important to be aware of this fantasy and how it can drive your life in a negative way if you're not keeping it in check. Very often the desire for sex can go directly against the desire to have a loving, meaningful relationship. And as you mature as a male, you'll find that you tend to balance out the two a lot better. That's been my experience anyway. This desire to be extremely sexual in your life goes away as you become more mature and you start to seek a more meaningful, caring relationship. It doesn't mean that sex disappears, it just means that it's not the complete driver for everything in your life. So whether we're willing to admit it or not, sex can be a very strong driver of our behavior at a subconscious level, and it's definitely one of the male fantasies that we have to be aware of. And the third male fantasy, I believe, is dominance. And I want to separate dominance from power because I think dominance has more of a physical component to it. I think this is why men like things like action movies or fighting, like UFC or boxing matches, things like that. We like video games that have an element of violence in them because they're displaying dominant behavior. At a very subconscious primal level, there is a tendency to want to physically dominate or to be seen as dominant physically. If you ever go to a gym and you watch people working out, something I've been doing recently, you'll notice that a lot of the male figures in the room are kind of strutting around, acting very physically dominant. And I think it can be a little bit of a crutch, especially if you're a person who is very into physical fitness or wants to be seen as physically dominant, that maybe you're getting into fights or maybe you're being pushy physically or whatever it is. It can become a trap because yes, it kind of works to a point. It can get you ahead in the world because you're intimidating to other people, but it actually doesn't help you to build long-term meaning in your life and to have rewarding relationships with people. So this idea of dominance, I think, is something, again, that can be a little bit taboo because we don't really want violence in our societies. We don't want to be seen as someone who's cruel or mean or hurting other people, but it is something that's underneath the surface. And again, I think it's why we crave things like watching sports or playing video games or watching violence in movies and TV and things like that, because it kind of sates that desire. It quells the hidden fantasy to be a dominant male. And so it's something that I've been aware of in my life. I've never really had an issue personally, but I've noticed a lot of my friends and some family members too having to find their way through this male desire for dominance physically and to start to quell it and to behave in a more civilized, more controlled way. Dominance is always going to be there. If someone threatens you physically, you're going to feel it immediately. But I think it's something that in our regular society day to day, we can be aware of, but we can also start to say it's not healthy and we can put it aside and we can let the male fantasy element of it just start to fade away over time. So I know this is a little bit of a different video from what I normally do. It's just something that I've had in my mind for a long time, and I wanted to share the insight for anyone who is going through these sort of situations for themselves. As I said, I've struggled with certain things in my life trying to understand my hidden male fantasies for myself. Maybe you have the same kind of thing, and I'm interested to know. So please share in the comments, do you have challenges with things like power or sex or dominance in your life? Do you find that they tend to sort of haunt you? They're underneath the surface and they drive a lot of your behavior subconsciously. It's a fascinating topic to explore. I've done a lot of journaling about it. I've talked to other people who have gone through it themselves, and I've read a lot about it, and it's really helped me to develop myself and to understand what it means to be a healthy masculine person. So my friend, hopefully these ideas have been valuable for you. Leave a like on this video if you like what I'm saying here. And if you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider subscribing. We'd love to have you as part of our community. My name is Daniel Midson-Short. Thank you for watching, and thank you for improving yourself. All right, that's it.